Good afternoon, everybody. Have you ever tried to tear up grass with your bare hands? It's pretty tough, isn't it? The grass of the savannah can resist the trampling of a herd of elephants. That is because the roots are so tightly woven together, and each individual plant supports the other. And this way, a strongly rooted culture could resist the domination of a tyrant or the encroachment of a dominant culture. Currently, many Aboriginal cultures are being torn up by their very roots due to war or economic domination from cultures like our own. You could say that we've lost our roots when you look at the way that we treat the planet, the way we treat our children, the way we treat the rest of humanity. We have a lot to learn from these Aboriginal cultures. And if we don't do something to stop their obliteration, it'll be too late to learn, too late to know what they could have given to global society. To sustain Aboriginal cultures, they need to be strengthened at that grassroots level. This is something that I learned personally working with Aboriginal cultures in West Africa. I was living out there in an impoverished conflict zone. I was looking for ways to stop the cycle of poverty and conflict. I came up with an idea that through trade, we could strengthen indigenous cultures with a virtuous circle of trade. By creating ethical and sustainable supply chains, we deal with all of the issues from poverty to transport to biodiversity. Probably the best way to explain this is to take you with me on my journey, and then you can see how I came to this conclusion. I was a sailor and a young mother, and I wanted to continue living at sea and wanted to bring my children up at sea and sustain my family at the same time. So I came up with this idea of transporting goods with a sailing ship. And I went off to West Africa with the idea of finding something of high value in relation to its displacement that would be feasible to transport on a sailing boat. We went to Senegal. That was in 2005. The girls were 1 and 3 at the time. And we went off and we lived in this little village that was only accessible by boat. It's in Senegal. Life was simple, basic, and I soon discovered it was really hard. The people worked from before sunrise until well after sundown, just to sustain basic survival. I was encouraged, but they were full of hope and courage, but it was hard to watch as my friends gardened with their bare hands, slept on mats on the floor, not enough money to pay doctors, children dying from drinking unclean water, the list goes on. How many times have I seen the disappointment in a woman's eyes when the tomatoes that she had been weeding and watering all season rotted before she could get them to market, because the market's 45 minutes away by boat, the petrol costs a fortune. We became part of the community. I made friends without language. The kids just fell in with the other kids, as kids do. One night the kids became ill. They were coughing all through the night. I woke up the next morning, and the villagers came to me and said, "Oh, we heard the girls coughing all night long. We have this oil called tulakuna. If you rub that on the chest, it'll stop the cough." I said, "Okay." So I went to the woman, the local producer, got some of the oil, rubbed it on the chest, and sure enough, they stopped coughing. And then I got a sore back, and they're like, "Well, rub that on their backs, your back, you'll feel better." And sure enough, I did, and so on and so forth with just about everything. This oil, the tulakun, is used in traditional medicine to heal everything from eczema to arthritis, to head lice, to colds. And I became intrigued with this oil. So I went around to some other villages and talked with other producers about the oil. but also found out that the tree itself is very important to their culture, to their biodiversity, and even to their religion. It's many parts of the tree are used in traditional medicine. The trees, the nuts, which are used for the oil, are also sustain a lot of ranging animals, a lot of wild animals. You can see the tree is called a Caripa procera. It has a very large canopy which protects the groundwater, which is very important now in times of climate change. The wood is quite sturdy and is used for many tools. Here's a man carving the catillon du Maine, which is used in rice harvesting. The process of making the oil is it's very arduous. Here we see women, they're actually crushing, they crack the nuts and then they crush them, and then they boil the paste from that over a slow fire, simmer the paste over a slow fire for sometimes up to 18 hours to get the oil to come. Through the process of learning about the Tulakuna, I got to know the people who are called, their ethnic names, the Jula. They're very, they have a very strong wisdom tradition that's connected to nature, so they're very strong-rooted people. Women are the heads of the households and very much at the center of the society. They're engaged in a conflict with the Senegalese government. So very much this peaceful, gentle Aboriginal culture that are experiencing domination from an external force, external culture. The area that we're working in, it's called the Casamance, and where we're working includes the north of Guinea-Bissau as well. It's called the Royaume de Casa. They've been engaged in an armed conflict since 1982. Now, the conflict wasn't really obvious to us while we were there. There were no-go zones, military checkpoints, but we felt quite safe in our little village. And sometimes you could hear mortar fire in the distance, but the villagers always assured me that the conflict had never actually come to their village. They were very lucky. There were many villages where even the schools were landmined. The amount of handicapped young people is phenomenal. There's about 200 villages in the region that are still mined. It became clear to me that to find a solution to the cycle of conflict and poverty, we could find this in the indigenous people themselves. And what was needed was for them to be empowered economically. What we needed to do is find a commodity that was available throughout the region, that could be found in all of the villages, and that was also of high value to an external market. And the Tulakuna, for me, represented that commodity. So another problem is isolation. If you look at this map is a map of the road systems leading between high-producing areas and deep water ports. See the gray bit there where there's no roads? That's the bit where we're working. So we've got transport issues as well. So we're producing stuff in the villages, but no way to get it out. So where we're working is separated from the north of Senegal by the Gambia. So the roads are tracks, and quite often in the rainy season, they're virtually impassable. Many of the villages are only accessible by footpath or by boat. So this is an aerial shot of the region. So how do you get goods out of an area where there's no road system and no deep water ports? The answer for us is we've designed a ship, a low draft sailing ship, cargo ship that can access these regions. We took our cues from the ships of the South Pacific. This is an ancient South Pacific cargo ship that could transport 20 tons. and sail close to the wind. And it's still in use today. So we based our design on using modern technology. We've designed a cargo sailing ship. This, well, we've built a 12-meter model that we're eventually intending to build up to take up to a 60-meter version. Here you can see we're weight testing it with a ton of cargo. There's movement between the hulls here. This will be used for energy recuperation. The main hull there, see, you have to use your imagination. The main hull there will be 60 meters, and it will be able to transport 500 tons. The draft on this will be a maximum of 6 meters. And so as you can see, we can get into these regions and actually pick up goods at the point of production, allowing the indigenous community to have access to world markets, which is the whole point. We're working with women's associations in the area to build a women's cooperative, a producers cooperative. There's women's associations in all the villages, and we're working with these women's associations to create a supply chain where the women actually have ownership of the supply chain, from the producer right through to market. So not just giving a good price to the producer, but actually creating micro-entrepreneurs where the women actually are making the leadership decisions, have that authority, and are in charge of the supply chain. So by using their systems to economically empower individual women, we are using their systems, so strengthening the indigenous culture at that grassroots level, and making sure that the money falls back at the base of the supply chain in the hands of the women who are at the center of the households and the providers for the families, and at the center of the... There's a fragile piece that's been declared in the Casamance at this moment, and by economically sustaining the region, we allow that piece to flourish. Thanks.